Hey everyone, today let's talk about property rights. In the US, there's a narrative about how we are the freest country in the world. And I think that narrative might mostly be perpetuated by Americans. But part of that freedom that we talk about is property rights. And I would argue that property rights are among the most important rights that we enjoy as Americans. Most of our other rights lose a lot of their potency if the right to own property is diminished or not present. Unfortunately, I have 3 points I want to make about property rights in the US that would indicate that the strength of our right to own property in the US is not as strong as we might think. My first point is property taxes. When most of us think of property taxes, those would apply mostly to house ownership or home ownership. But it can also extend to your car or your boat or your trailer. And a lot of that is variable to what state you're living in. In addition to that, many states tax the capital that companies own. For instance, the state that I live in, companies are required to pay taxes on all the capital and equipment that they own that is worth more than $500. I believe that's the mark, but regardless, companies are required to pay taxes on items they have already purchased. And so when you think about that, individuals having to pay taxes on certain class of property and businesses having to pay taxes on the property that they own, well, what happens if an individual or a company refuses to pay those taxes? The state will eventually come and take that property. So that is a blatant admission that the government owns these certain classes of property and rents them out to us. Point 2, eminent domain. Eminent domain is the idea, I guess the law, since it is the law of the land, that the government can seize property, mainly land, in the effort to build certain public works or in the interest of public use. Traditionally, this would mean the confiscation. I would say confiscation, but the law says that individuals have to be compensated for their property. But if they are not given the right to refuse selling their land, then it's no longer compensation, it is confiscation. But it's been traditionally used for building roads or other public works. So typically, land would be taken from citizens, they would be compensated for it, and then the government would use it for its own purposes. Typically, projects that could be used by the public. Unfortunately, in recent history, it has become more and more used for transferring property from one private owner to another. For instance, Donald Trump used eminent domain. He petitioned the government to use eminent domain to take the property, the house of someone living next to his casino, and have it transferred to him so that he could build a larger garage, a larger parking garage. And now how the government justified this is saying that, oh, well, it's for public use because the casino is used by the public. Therefore, it's public use and it is justifiable underneath the Fifth Amendment which requires the government to only take land for public use and after it compensates the original owner for it. Eminent domain has also been used extensively in cities where they build stadiums. So they take land from people, pay them whatever they decide they want to, and then give that land to rich professional team owners so that they could build large, lavish stadiums, often at great taxpayer cost. So that's a pretty good double whammy right there. Even if the state did not use eminent domain to transfer property from one party to another, it would still be immoral and a violation of property rights to take property from someone without their consent, even if it is used for a public project and if they're compensated for it. Consent is the important part here, and if there is no consent, then that is a violation. The final point is civil asset forfeiture. This is a tool used mainly by law enforcement to confiscate property. And this ranges from cash money to vehicles to houses and everything in between. And the only thing needed by law enforcement to use civil asset forfeiture is the belief that a certain property was used in the commission of a crime. And the civil part of civil asset forfeiture means that there does not need to be a criminal conviction of the owner of the property in order for it to be confiscated. Now, I think we can all understand why that's a violation of not only property rights, but of the right to trial by a jury. So what happens to all the property and money that gets confiscated from people? Well, that just goes back into the budgets of the law enforcement organizations. And in a lot of states, this is the revenue shared between the federal and whatever law enforcement agency in the state is involved in the asset forfeiture. I think we can all understand how that would put in very serious perverse incentives for law enforcement to confiscate property from people because it ends up back in their treasury. And again, this is by and large a admission by the government that it owns your property or all property, and if it feels that you used it in a way that it didn't like, it can take it from you. Unfortunately, both eminent domain and civil asset forfeiture have been abused extensively in the past. And I think there's a lot of people who don't notice this because if it doesn't happen to you, then it's not very easy to notice that the state is confiscating things. So you have it, 3 ways in which the United States government and the state governments admit that they own most, if not all, of our property. The sad thing is that over time, the abuses of eminent domain and civil asset forfeiture seem to be increasing over time. And if you don't believe me, I have listed a lot of articles and links in the description that you can read and get a bigger picture of what's going on. You don't have to believe every word I say. Thanks for listening.